It would only flood if we get like a 100-year storm.
Is that up north of Atkins?
That's actually, this particular area will be, yes, it is north.
It's up in the North Point area up in that area.
Yes.
How many, not just this list, how many drainage areas are there in the city that when we have a heavy rain, and I realize they don't go evenly across the city, but let's assume it did, actually cause flooding in residences or businesses? Not to cause drainage problems, but where the water gets up, like that video you talked about the other day, where it's getting in houses. Is it like 5 or is it like 50? Where in a heavy rain, flash flooding situation, not a 100-year flood, but a flash flooding situation, is causing water to get in somebody's house or business.
Well, to quantify that, you have to look at it from a couple of different areas. You have to look at whether or not there's street flooding, which is called flash flooding, and there's a particular storm drainage that may be blocked. Okay, that contributes to that. The other would be is for a lot of these properties, whether in the rear, capacity. You know, if there's limited capacity and we get a rainfall like we did on March 10th, and water just doesn't have anywhere to go, it comes out of the embankment and it floods.
That's one, I'm not talking about a street drainage block that got up in somebody's yard. Like you're talking about the video the other day, that happens every time there's a major flood. And I know that happens in other places in town too, I just happen to see the news that night. But those, whenever you have that flash flooding 2 or 3 times a year, it's like you get in big houses. How many places are there like that?
Drainage basins that were identified in the stormwater master plan as being the 3 worst drainage basins for flooding with the highest business risk exposure scores, and we provided that data before, and that was Town Creek, New Banks Creek, and what was the third?
Those are the ones that have the biggest impact when you say business impact.
For flooding and.
But that's residential business.
Yes.
It's structure.
Risk, yes.
Structure.
Yes.
Town Creek, Bellhaven, and
New
Eubanks.
Banks.
Is there anything on this list that affects Town Creek? I mean, where I'm going with that question, it seems to me like that ought to be where our priority is we've got 3 areas that are causing the worst damage. Granted, it'd be good to solve some other issues, but right now we've got water going in somebody's house or this business. It seems to me like that's a priority.
And that's why for in year 2, instead of going through and doing more study for the drainage system, we were trying to focus on those 3 drainage basins with the stormwater engineering services, which is includes identification and prioritization of the projects that were identified for those basins, and then design and implementation of those projects.
Okay, I understand that for year 2, but we're talking about what we're dealing with in year 1, and year 1 did not.
Because we identified these projects, and moving forward, we said that we would identify and prioritize based on the data that we have. That's the data we have for drainage that identified those 3 drainage basins. And some of these are in Eubanks Creek. Can you go through the drainage basins?
Wait.
And even though those are, per the report, the drainage basins that had the highest risk exposure scores and major flooding issues, there are in all of the drainage basins issues similar to that, but those had the highest score.
I understand that. Thank you. Before you go back to them, I want to ask the same question just asked. I don't see any of these that affect Town Creek. I see some that affect Eubanks and some that affect.
Well, Woodrow Wilson to Erie Street is
Does it?
Town
Okay.
Creek Trip.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. Good, thank you. Even though these were the ones we did in year 1, now that they're costing so much, my question is, before we approve spending a $500,000 rather than $130,000 on engineering 1, that now we know from this stormwater drainage study that it's not nearly as important as fixing something over here or here, before we sit there and say, yeah, we're going to double up that money and go over here, because priority rating, the ones we looked at a year ago now we got more information, should we say that was not the best decision, let's go make another decision? If Woodrow Wilson area affects that, you just backed it up on, you raised it, if it affects Town Creek, and this study shows that Town Creek is one of the 3 worst drainage areas, in my mind, that ranks that one up higher than, pick another one, I don't care which one, I don't want to be picky. But I'm just saying, that to me is, even if we did approve it a year ago, I don't care, now we're looking at a triple the cost.
Where is your
Can I-
hollow
can I-
circle, what drainage basin is it?
Smith Creek.
Okay, that is a neighborhood where when it floods, and it floods with every major rain, the people can't get out of their neighborhood. And that is an issue with not just the people being able to get in and out of their neighborhood, but also emergency services being able to
But
access
we-
those
Dwayne,
people.
go
But we approved that one for construction last year, didn't we?
Yeah, but the white,
I got a question for you, and then I want to make any idea what that number was for those that we're talking about, that he's mentioning as far as being that subset, maybe, do we have dollar on
For the whole drainage basin.
for those 3.
for those 3?
For the, all 3 drainage basins, we can provide that. For the whole, it was millions of dollars of work for
But for
each
do-
drainage
But for
basin.
doing this part of those drainage basins, Charles, if I understand you right, for doing this part of those drainage basins, and we approved Brook Hollow, we already approved constructing that one, the one that
But
you're
that's
talking.
to the point that there are other major issues.
Okay.
The reason why the folks who identified drainage projects to start with, they identified things where we
Okay.
knew we had issues, where people have been waiting for relief.
Okay, well, that applies to about 100,000 people in the city. Eubanks Creek, we've already approved and we're moving on with. If Woodrow Wilson to Erie Street is $900,000, and, which one did you say, Woodrow Wilson to Riverside is $660,000. And I don't know whether Belmont makes sense or not, Charles, I defer to somebody smarter, but it seems to me that starting off, Woodrow Wilson to Erie and Woodrow Wilson to Riverside and Eubanks Creek fit that criteria before we go any further. Now, I don't know about the Belmont to Piedmont or whatever.
I'm going about the same stride you are, but I'm just looking at this, and again, I'm hearing what you say, and I'm hearing what the folks that know more about it than I know as far as what needs to be done first. You've already got a priority system, and the ones you mentioned are in the top tier of that. If we would just
But Woodrow Wilson to Riverside is number 4, and then 1, 2, 3.
is a big hang
Forest
on.
Avenue to Northside Drive is on Eubanks Creek.
I'm just saying, if you go
Can you-
down,
yeah.
Hold on, go ahead, Dwayne.
if you just go down, take the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, just hold off the 7. I mean, those are the lead.
I'm not sure you can get the 5, but that's beside the point. That's
But
the discussion.
you've got, you're saying, you're taking out
You're talking about-
$4.25 million.
You're talking about spending $12 billion, where's it come from? Now, we're talking about, none of that will be,
Same place.
wait, well, none of that will be spent until next year, because we still don't have engineers in place for this year. So we're not talking about, we're talking about next year's $13 million.
Yeah, we can't send it to the council until we get the money approved.
But money for construction or money for engineers?
Engineering.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying. But only some of them are ready to go to council, and that's depending on us agreeing. It says it's going to council next week, but we haven't agreed to raise the budget from 200,000 to 421 yet.
But we don't have to. Only thing that we have to do is, again, work from a pot of money that we have. The pot of money that we have is what, $13 million?
Yeah, and really, we can look at the encumbered amount, and this is a part of the
Right now,
publication
we
too.
have $26.9 million collected.
Okay.
15 million of that was approved.
Okay.
And part of that is some design money for the projects that we identified for year 1. Aside from that, we have 11.7 remaining.
Wait, has the council not already entered the contract for the $9 million on the Operation Orange County?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah, right, so that is approved by this group and is approved by the council. I would say that is spent, so if you start from 26, that's not available.
can we start with,
Can you walk us through that?
yeah, sorry, can we start with, in this package, one of the first pages is expenditure by category, correct? Under drainage, you'll see allocated budget. Overall, the amount budgeted for drainage was $5.7 million. Encumbered is $69.9 million, so that's money that we cannot touch because it's under contract.
69,000.
It's right there.
69,000. sorry.
69, wait, she said 69,000.
I want to understand now.
Yeah, sorry, so
She said
69.
69 million. I was thinking we be talking $69 million. I missed that
Be quiet for 5 minutes. I'm trying to tell us.
million. I missed the million for $69 million.
Okay.
All right, so we have
Be quiet
encumbered.
for 5 minutes, and then we come back to your questions, okay, so we can hear.
So we have $69,950 that's encumbered. That means we cannot touch those funds. It's already under contract and it's been approved by the city council. The balance of what's allocated or what's budgeted within drainage is what's budgeted and what's left over from the encumbered is $5,708,229. Now, what I would propose is we could start out with that number because technically it's already approved. We would not be taking any money from contingency, but it's not under contract. So if we wanted to look at redirecting projects, I would start with that $5.7 million first. And then if we want to add to that, we can. But at least we know that that's money that's already approved and we can kind of work with that within our own budget.
So you're saying we start with that 5.7,
Mhm.
go to this prioritization, and we're just talking about engineering right now, right? We're not talking about construction costs.
Yeah, and really since that sheet only shows construction costs.
Yeah.
And I apologize for continuing to go through a whole bunch of different sheets, but we might even want to look at this sheet right here.
That shows me right.
Right, so this one shows your PE costs, your
Which page is
CE9
that?
costs. That's the third
Oh,
page.
this. All right.
Right.
stand for?
Construction engineering and inspection.
Just 5.708 is part of that 15 million.
Yes, we already approved that $5.1 million. This is broken up into what, yeah. And so I tried to put as much information in this package as possible, so we can kind of, sorry that we're all over the place. But what we can do is, if we look at this sheet, which kind of breaks down your PE costs, your professional engineering costs,
Right.
your CE9, which is construction engineering and inspection, and then your proposed construction costs. Mind you, the CE&I and construction costs really won't be felt until we start actual construction. So we still got to go through design. So that would be felt more so at the end of the project. But as we look at the priority of our drainage projects and we look at the numbers that we are projecting for engineering costs, construction costs, and the CE&I services, we can kind of figure out what we want to approve of, this first round of project.
I mean, I still think that it just makes sense that if they're prioritized, we know what our pot of money looks like. We work from both the prioritization list and we determine what projects out of that prioritization list. And if they're rated 1 through whatever, we start at the most critical at 1 until we get to a zero balance, if you will. Yes, sir.
Since we don't have an infinite amount of money, we have a pot. I'm just curious, what is the criteria for CEI services and PE services? I mean, is there a percentage we're working off of construction? I mean, 'cause some of these are
Higher than
up to 40% engineering fees, and that's extremely
On
high.
top of the engineering design.
I mean,
Would you also?
engineering,
I mean, so you could pay
construction engineering,
2 engineers to
inspection is
engineer.
10%, which
And I think that's also because some of these projects include easement or right-of-way acquisition or easement acquisition too. So we would have to pay for getting some kind of construction easements in order to start the project. And I think that's including design, but I'll have.
Just design.
Now,
Why you explain this, would you just give a layman's explanation of PE
Yeah.
versus CEI?
well, we took a approach that MDOT does, and what we're doing is, on our PE, we're using about a 15-16% percentage of what we think our estimated construction cost is going to be.
And so at the end, we'll be able to see that.
That's right. Now, that's not including the CNI. We'll come back and renegotiate that on most of the drainage projects, where we probably at 60%, and we know exactly what we're planning to use as far as the type of improvement. But the main goal was to go ahead and get the design contract awarded and keep it around that 15%.
But
For
we're not,
engineering.
For engineering, strictly engineering,
so,
PE.
so the numbers that are in here don't reflect that 15%.
For just
Some are
PE.
much higher, or either.
Well, Beechcrest is $1,451,000 and PE is $400,000.
Which is 30%.
Yeah, so it's more. But I mean, if you, and then 120 on top of that for the CEI, so I mean, you're at
That'll double.
520 of a $1.4 million project. It's a lot of.
CEI includes what?
Construction engineering inspection.
Inspection.
So that's inspection during construction.
That's inspection.
But that's,
Yeah,
some of
on
these
top
are
of-
showing is almost 10%.
Some of that on top of 16%. Okay.
I mean, if we have one construction engineer inspection crew that we hire, or is that multiple?
No, this is each firm's estimate for them.
Each firm will do their own inspection.
Just so that we have a standard that we can go from project to project, and we're not doing different sums here and there, we'll be able to track it. And use one pot of money and stretch that pot as much as possible, rather than just, it looks like there's different amounts per project. I didn't know if they're, because one's more difficult than the other one.
No, go ahead, Sheree.
But that should equal the cost
We still have a
of
couple,
construction. So
we still have some that we're still negotiating, so some of these figures may not be correct.
The cost entered here is the proposal cost, right? But it's not the final cost. Like, only for 6, the negotiated cost is good here, because that's all the negotiated.
Well, how do we know which is the, which is
If you go to the
the,
status, it says,
Okay.
making revised proposal, making revised proposal.
we should be, if we know that it's a percentage of construction, then that should just be, just a formula that automatically tells us what that fee should equal, and not the proposed fees, because those are,
Let me ask you a
it
question.
seems to be
Yes,
even in
ma'am.
a pot.
As we look at this, and you all know more about this than I do in terms of engineering, is it possible that we could put a range in a cap on it, that it will not exceed this percentage of that? And it seems to me that will give us a better figure to work with. We'll know it won't go over that, because these are just truly estimates. It's really hard to know what the total project will look like, and the real dollars that we have to work with.
it's even harder to approve
Right,
a
it is.
proposal.
That's what we.
There should be a policy, percentage that they can charge, and that will be approved.
Communicate the same.
If you go to the city council with one of these professional contracts, you negotiate it, is that right now to say, I want you to approve $60,000 from PE, or I want you to approve $180,000 from PE and CE&I? Which way does that contract go? Because the CE&I, as I understand what you just said, it goes estimated. The other's kind of somewhat fixed based on what the contract is.
Only the design, as of now, the department is looking at only the design contract. Add on CE and I, that's the design.
But I mean, what does the council approve? This is what you're asking to.
So I think what he's trying to say is they can approve either. So we can, what we bring before council, we can either bring before council a design contract or a contract for both design and CE&I.
But what do we intend to bring?
Yeah.
Design.
The design.
All right, when you bring the design, does that marry to whatever they're gonna charge you anyway for CE&I? I mean, when you sign this design contract, does it get you married to whatever they're billing you over here for CE&I?
No.
How does that affect, how does
That's when
that,
you said we gotta
That's
go
what
back and
it's saying.
negotiate.
They'll be renegotiated.
that's renegotiation?
Yes, sir.
Well, based on the actual scope of work. And what Charles was saying was that they're using kind of the MDOT's guidance on the percentage of,
But it's set, it's a
I know,
statewide.
I understand.
because the city does not have a written policy for any kind of, because we've seen a whole range of things. And so there is a range that you're gonna see, because each project is different, the scopes are different, and every consultant has different overhead rates. So there is gonna be some variability, but we're trying to stay within that range.
Let me ask you a hypothetical, let me put it in a hypothetical situation. On the Forest Hill, Forest Avenue project, it's $1,018,000 estimated construction. I'm gonna round that off to $1 million. if you were to carry to the city council a PE contract you negotiated with whoever this is, as well, and they said, I want 17%, or they said, I want 15%, but you kind of decided on what that is, you would go in and say, city council, we want a $150,000 contract for PE on that. Either the 16% is kind of the standard, or for whatever reason, it might be $1 more or $1 less, and that it's going to be somewhere around that 16%. And that's what we're doing in city council.
If we're basing it off MDOT, it's probably quality-based selection, which is the C or C plus or whatever type of project it is, which comes up with a certain percentage. And I don't think it really matters about whose overhead's higher because it's quality-based, so it's.
That's the
it
selection
works out.
process.
Okay.
So it has some kind of guidelines.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that these weren't proposals that were spreading around in different firms and based on what they proposed as a lump sum, we think it's this.
Yeah, we
Okay.
thoroughly vetted
I got
several firms.
I got one more question to get where I think Wayne was going. This cost over here, year one construction cost, that has been revised based on having talked to the suggested proposed selected engineer of what their estimated cost of that construction is, not our estimated cost a year. They've looked at the site, they know what they're doing, and they say, this is the estimated cost, which granted might go up and down. Okay.
And
But we're dealing on a new estimate.
And we requested the construction estimates at this point to give us a ballpark, and so that we could understand how much we need to be looking for in terms of funding.
Yeah.
Would it be prudent to go ahead and adopt the MDOT policies if we don't already have a set policy for the city? Since this is going to be a multi-year process for infrastructure.
For the commission,
It wouldn't be for the commission, it'd be for the city. I think.
Well, for the city, I mean, but the process of deciding and then that way, engineers or whoever would know to look at the set policies.
Along where we are, is what you said a minute ago, and I understand the priorities that are on here, but just because of the mention that, and it seemed like to me, said there's no, if you looked at U-Banks, which we've already made into, we know that, Forest Avenue that you tell me is part of U-Banks, Woodrow Wilson to Erie Street, which is part of Town Creek, and Woodrow Wilson to Riverside Drive, which is the other one you said, if you add those up on the construction cost, it's $5,071,000. Now you gotta add the PEC and I to it, so it's gonna make it $6 or $7 million by the time you get there. That's a little bit out of the order of the priority on there, but it's based on this other study we had. And seems like it hits, if you go down the other priorities, you gotta get to Wood Hill Road at $2.8 million, you spend it all right there and you don't go to get any further. It just seems like those, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Basically, you're taking out,
George Washington, Wood Hill Road out of the top of that list.
Washington. And
The Eubanks was also had to do with that venue
Yeah.
data center on.
Yeah, and I got Eubanks
Road.
included.
Yeah.
Well,
That was
Eubanks,
just one thing you had mentioned about that earlier.
yeah, I think Eubanks we had already done.
it was counted in, yeah.
Well, wait, but is that that $2,489,000 I got included in that $5 million. So I got Eubanks included in it. And Forest Avenue is part of Eubanks, an extension of Eubanks.
So you got that.
What I was saying, if you had Eubanks, Forest Avenue, Woodrow Wilson to Erie, and Woodrow Wilson Riverside Drive, it seems to me that that's spending $5 million, $5,071,000 on the anticipated construction, plus you got the PE and CE and I. That's gonna be close to within the 5.7 million from this list. It seems like at least as a starting point, and whether we go beyond that, certainly, but just as a starting point for Keith, I think you said, basically one of you said,
Then the 5.7.
yeah.
Okay, just for
Did
the,
you confirm which drainage basins all of these were in?
Yes.
Go
he
through
did.
that list. Oh, okay.
Yes. yeah.
Let me ask you this though, Pete.
Charles, I am right on, that they were part of those that you said, the town grade, the.
Town Green, Eubanks, better.
And I think that would help with the narrative if, you know, like when the media, these projects are being announced, that it's connected to.
Yeah, here's the study.
Project.
Here's the study that we did, and this said these are the worst ones, and this is beginning to address the worst.
But I'm saying like to the general public.
Okay, I think the only question that would come up, and you probably have already stated this, just for the record, if we did those that you named, we're leaving out Old Wood Hill Road and George Washington Drive, right?
Out of the ones,
Out of
the ones that rate your priority 4 or above,
Yeah.
by this priority
That's
criteria.
from the 0
Yeah.
And it's just because I changed the priority criteria to say the impact on the major street. I changed my priority criteria from this one to over here and decided, look, and it also was a budget priority.
We flipped 1 4 up to a 3, and then took out 2. I mean,
Yeah, I moved 1 4 up to a 3, and I didn't do all the 3, but it was also
two
budget.
3s down, basically, is what you did.
There's still 3s, it's just not this year's 3s.
I have a question about the priority. Oakmont, which is in Ward 5, is rated 65 for priority, and yet it's prioritized as 5.
Which one's the best?
Why? It rates high in points, but it doesn't rate. To me, it should be like a 4.
Well, it doesn't mind driving.
It's under,
The bill is down from ready to
And at least 4.
It's the only one that's kind of out of order. And I was wondering.
Charles, did you have anything?
was that a typo?
It could be, we could take another look at that.
Okay.
He got 15 points on erosion control issue and no major flooding, and I think that's why it is. I'm just going to guess here. If you look over there to the right of the criteria, it received 15 points on erosion control and no major flooding that Woodrow Wilson Riverside didn't, but it doesn't have the same impact on the structures and housing or prerequisite for something else. And so even though it got more points, what the points were for seemed to be about where the difference comes in, and that's the real subjective guess is what that was.
Okay, let me ask this, and see if I can get everybody's approval, have somebody make a motion, but has everybody looked at the sheet enough to know the ones that Steve's talking about in the shifting that we did? We could just look at it one more time. We're taking Wood Hill Road and George Washington Drive and dropping those to the 4, or lower 3. That we're taking out of what we're saying we're going to do, and we're moving up Woodrow Wilson.
So, can you just run through the list of what we're doing?
Okay.
And then just check them off?
Yeah.
The Eubanks, we've already talked about, Forest Avenue, and then Woodrow Wilson
To Erie.
to Erie,
Okay.
and then Woodrow Wilson to Riverside.
That's my motion.
Those 4?
Those are both.
For right now.
For right now. That's the $5 million.
That's the $5,071,000 for construction. That's not saying we're not going to do the other.
Like what
That's the starting point.
That's the
So
starting
that's what I
point.
was gonna say.
That would be the starting point.
That's-
How is that defined for right now?
That's
Someone
Today.
today,
Today.
but until the next.
For today. That's-
Okay.
Until next
What time do we meet again, talk about something else?
Okay. Just wanna be
Up until 4 o'clock today.
If we vote on it real quick before Pete changes his
No,
mind.
Can you make a motion?
I just made the motion, but I did have a question.
Okay.
I gotta get a second, then I will have.
Just a second, yes, okay.
You need a second?
I've got a motion, I've got a second now, Ted.
Second.
Okay, Ted, put this down, it's on.
Charles,
Yes, sir.
if you did Woodrow Wilson to Riverside and didn't do the other part of that structure, which is Belmont to Piedmont, does that make sense? I think I heard you say a while ago it did.
Well, the what Southern has committed to do is to look at the entire area as part of their scope. And if we get into the 30% and we see that what we need to do upstream will have a direct impact in a favorable around that area, then we're good. But if we see that we need to add, then of course we may have to come back and say, well, we need to amend it. But
I think I understand you. It makes sense right now for us just to say Woodrow Wilson, Riverside. If Southern comes back and says something different, you might want to come back and say, hey, this needs to be put from a construction side or a planning side. It makes sense to do that one without doing the Belmont and Piedmont.
yes.
In my motion saying.
I have a question on that after we're done.
It's been, okay, we're there. We got the motion in a second. He's back off. That's that.
Oh, I was just curious, Charles, I was curious, that area, I've heard discussion about that area being created as some type of retention because so much water comes down from the medical center. Is that potentially, but that area could just get completely opened up where it would actually hold water for some period of time during storms and what? I mean, it's overgrown now, so it's just a ditch, right?
It's a possibility. I think that's a strong possibility that was even referenced in the 2013 drainage plan, the possibility of that, so.
I've had a lot of people asking me about the
That area
development on
just
the
west
campus,
of Morris
and the
School.
water
Yes.
that it's shed now
Right beside
through the
the
city.
I assume that's an A&E, a P&E, PE question. That's a possibility.
Answer your question.
Yes.
You're good?
Yes.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor. I hear any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
All right, so gotta get my bearings on where we are exactly. But,
No idea.
so if it's okay with everyone where we are right now, I'm just gonna go through the rest of the PowerPoint presentation. We're gonna get to a point where we're gonna talk about the drainage projects that are ready to go before City Council. One of those we just agreed that we're not gonna do, and we'll kind of discuss that once that slide comes up. Keep going. So this is work in progress. So the projects I'd like to talk about first are the utility cut repair contract that's ongoing as of right now. Eastover Drive is moving, Brook Hollow Circle, the drainage improvement project is moving. Hanging Moss Bridge is also going, Ready Mix Bridge, and then the Greening Gateways project, State Street and West Carolina Road. So we'll kind of go through that a little bit more.
Greening the Gateways is the Tiger project.
Yeah, so Greening the Gateways are both Tiger projects that Neil Schaefer is doing. So I wanted to note this because of the fact that there's been a lot of discussion on money being spent within, by 1% sales tax. All of these locations have been repaid under the utility cut repair contract. However, money has not been shown to be spent out of the 1% sales tax because we have not received an invoice for this work. So I just wanted to note that there is work being done under the utility cut repair contract. It's not showing as money spent because we have not received those invoices. Once we receive invoices, they go across the street to be approved by City Council, and then we can show them as.
The cost has been incurred, they just send the invoice for you.
No.
And that is out of the urgent needs category.
Yeah, we did receive one invoice, I think it was $65,000, I think.
But you ain't written a check and given it to them yet, so that's
I
why I'm
think
telling
it
you.
was on the claims docket for
Yes.
this week.
Okay, which was
So it'll
yesterday.
show up by the next meeting.
That's an important,
That's
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah.
because, you know, what we get, the questions all the time is, what have you done?
Well, I can tell you, when Michael and I drove around, or he drove and I rode,
Get that.
you know, when we're following the streets list and trying to figure out which ones need to be rated, what was it, 300 or below, or 299?
Yeah.
You know, we would see utility cut. Lacey had also sent me the list of all of these, so then we could look and say, well, this one was on the list. It's gonna. I've seen several of them have been done, but then there are some that haven't, and y'all need to know where those are. And I know I noted them, but
Yeah.
so if they're not done by the end of this month, then
Yeah.
y'all need to know about it so it can get on somebody's list, right?
Precinct 1, Ward 1.
Precinct 1, no, is South Jackson. Precinct 4 is Ward 1 and Ward 7.
This,
You'll see, like, St. Mary Street is in Bellhaven, I believe, and that's under 4,
oh, I see. That's-
right?
okay,
So
okay.
Eastover,
Okay, the precinct,
It's
okay.
the police.
Yeah, see
The
the
precinct, the
forward.
police precinct. Okay,
Yeah, so
police
it's-
precinct.
and the reason that it's broken out by precinct is because that's how it's bid out.
All right, I got you.
So-
Basically, one thing about, I'm not looking through, we got so many papers, is that in our documentation?
It's
on the back.
presentation.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's part of the
Good,
presentation.
because I think we should get that out, not
Yeah.
only you, but anybody that has been.
Maybe we get Jimmy to put
Did
that
the
out.
project website go?
Yeah, and I think.
Just make sure you were still with
So
us.
Andrea and was Public Works employees have been putting this on the website under Operation Orange Cone. So as it's been reported, or when we know about locations that crews are doing work, that gets sent to our Public Works Deputy Director, and she puts it on the website. So that has been going out on our city website under Operation Orange Cone. There will be another place that we'll start putting this information. We'll discuss that later on in the presentation, but we did go live with a capital improvement project website.
That's great, because we've got one of our fine media folks here today, so he can help us pick that up.
That means calling him media is a stretch. Let me make a suggestion on that.
How do we find this right?
Most people, and I didn't until about a year ago when I heard it explained it here, don't understand the difference between a utility cut and a pothole.
That's a good point.
And they see, they came down there on this street and passed this, and they skipped this forward. Well, they passed the utility cut because that's their contract. If somehow in putting that out, you could explain that this contract is doing this, there's another group, and people still say, well, that sounds very inefficient and stupid, but it makes sense. But I mean, the average Joe's gonna think it is. But when they were patching utility cuts, I heard one day, and I heard somebody talking about it, and I saw them, and they didn't do the pothole, and I understood the difference, but I guarantee nobody else on that street understood the difference.
Can I ask something too? I think I talked to Lacey about this. I asked the same or similar question, because when you, Hemp Hill is doing the work, I understand. And so if you see their repair of utility cut versus the city's repair of utility cut, I was trying to understand what the difference was. Is it training? Is it equipment? And I think it sounds like a combination of both, that there are some pieces of equipment that the city would need that they don't have in order to be able to do it.
Efficiently.
Yeah, because they saw cut it and they bring in crushed limestone or whatever. Anyway, I watched them do a few of them just because I was trying to understand. But to the extent that y'all make that recommendation to us, if there's some equipment, you know,
Yeah.
the city's in that business doing it already as well, but they're not being done as well as the
And
private
Leroy
contractors. How can we
Yeah.
bridge that gap?
Leroy had, because we have money left over in urgent need, and because the equipment costs were lower than we had budgeted for. So that was something that was lower.
Yeah, and that's in this breakdown as well.
He had asked if we could bring forward an amendment to request what they need is a new milling machine and the piece of equipment that, oh, you here.
You're doing great.
No.
Come on.
But no, just as stated, like you say, you know, we talked about whether it's an asphalt zipper or a small milling machine or even a bobcat, because with a bobcat, you can put different attachments on it, and that would be very efficient as far as trying to get a lot of the work actually done. So that's some of the differences that we do see, like you say, a contractor versus in-house crews. They do have equipment and items and resources that we would not have. So I'll be working closer with Lacey to you know, make sure she has a beefed up list to bring forth, and we can move forward.
I think that, you know, that would go a long way towards public opinion too, because they would realize, hey, we're training our people, we're getting them the right stuff, and it's not a big expenditure.
What is the Fairfield contract now? Is that to fix all the utility cuts in town, or how do they know where to fix it? Do they drive down the street and see one to fix it, or do they
It was a
see a
list.
certain one? I mean, what's the?
They had the list we had talked about that was outstanding since 2007. Engineering went out and they did the takeoffs for quantities for all of those utility cuts and then provided that information to the contractor. The problem that we're running into is because those utility cuts were so old, some of them, it's taking more material to repair them than was estimated. So we're not getting as much done as we wanted to, but we are making a big dent in the backlog. So that's allowing our crews in-house to focus on the pothole filling.
So, but on the utility cuts, their contract is to do X number of tons of
Tons,
asphalt
yeah,
until it runs out.
right.
And they just go down the list of what you have. But if there's another one there,
They've been trying to direct or prioritize based on severity, because some of them were pretty severe, and there were some areas that were inundated, because that's where we had a lot of utility failures.
In our drive around, some of the inspection, or some of the streets that said they need to be paved, and across the street, it was a utility cut. And I've noted a couple of those that they've been repaired through this program, and I would say the street doesn't need to be paved, not that it's perfect, but I mean, it changes your whole impression of that street, because now that intersection is paved.
Yeah. So that what the program manager is supposed to be doing is tracking all this information in GIS, and basically lining that up with where we had, streets highlighted for resurfacing, so that we can, it better informs our, selection of streets to be paved, truly paved, as well as the things that need to actually be reconstructed.
Good comments. Let's-
One more, quick.
One last one, then we're going to keep moving.
All right, for example, looking at 5 on St. Mary's Street, I know there's 2 more that weren't done when they were there. There were cars parked on top of them at the time. I mean, somebody's parked on the side of the street and there's blocking a 8-foot square utility cut. Do they go back and get those, or is the fact that they've already done St. Mary's is now going to not get done no matter what? I mean, and I've seen that other place, I just happened to see it on St. Mary's, that's the first time I saw it work.
No, basically what'll happen is whatever contractors miss, the in-house crews will end up doing. But in many cases, if we have those instances, we'll try to let the residents know on the street. But again, as you stated, if the vehicles or something is in the way, you have to keep moving.
Yeah, you have to keep moving, I mean,
Do we
or
send
tow
out
it.
prior notification to the residents before
Well,
the construction crew comes?
Well, I know in many cases, once we get on that street, we do, like put on.
Didn't have to, they were out there dancing in the street and holding parties and blowing bugles, they were happy, so it was, then you.
But we do make it known.
For our streets that are being repaid, they do.
I
know you
Okay, ladies, go ahead.
Okay, we can keep moving. This is just kind of an update on where projects are now, or where Eastover Drive. So we had the pre-bid meeting today for Eastover Drive to do construction. Construction bids are due April 26th, and then we expect to start construction July 1st for Eastover Drive. Brook Hollow Circle design is at 90% completion. Anticipated final design is around mid-April. And then we're developing the temporary construction easements and plans for construction bids so that we can bid construction out. Keep going. Hanging Moss Bridge, they've done the pre-construction meeting. Notice to proceed was issued April 3rd, and contractors mobilized. They'll have a 60-day construction schedule. So hopefully we can, or we're moving forward with getting Hanging Moss Bridge back up and running. Ready Mix Bridge, we've completed the bid tab, so we received construction bids March 15th. The lowest bid was Dozer LLC for $267,750.
That's under budget.
Yes, yes.
Is that under budget?
That's $495.
Yeah. So we're that's something to praise about. So yeah, we're moving forward with Ready Mix Bridge. Again, this is a bridge that was designed in-house by our own Dr. Williams. So the Tiger Grant projects, both projects are moving forward. We've gotten the MOU executed with MDOT and Federal Highway Administration. We've also received our Tiger Grant agreement and signed on the Tiger Grant agreement. We've had meetings with Tougaloo. Our next meeting with Tougaloo is going to be April 12th, so that's next week. Neil Schaefer is the design consultant, and so they've been doing the right-of-way acquisition right now for West Carolina Road. And then for, next slide, State Street, we did issue the notice to proceed for design of State Street. And so Neil Schaefer again is the design consultant for State Street, and they're moving forward with that project as well.
What happens to the railroad tracks?
For West Carolina Road?
Yeah, you go over them?
The new railroad we built next to it and then higher, and then the old, where the railroad is now, will be removed.
You go under them.
So the road will go under the railroad.
Street will go under.
Go under the railroad.
Okay, and so this is kind of,
It's always been that way.
That's
For
right.
10 years. It's
Take
been
it
that
over,
way.
take it over.
Yeah.
sorry, and
Raise it up and go under.
You know where the village drive.
and so this is just what we just discussed. These were the projects that were ready to go to City Council, to the next City Council meeting. We'll go ahead and take out, I believe we agreed that Wood Hill Road to Beasley Road, drainage improvements will not be done first, even though that's ready to go to City Council. We'll hold off on that, and we'll move forward with Eubanks Creek. Again, that's $400,000. The asterisk represents projects that are over the year one budget, or what was originally budgeted in year one. So Country Club Drive Bridge, May Street Bridge, are bridge projects that'll go forward before council. Eubanks Creek, Forest Avenue, Northside Drive, and then Woodrow Wilson and Erie, which we just discussed.
When
Yeah,
did we put the May Street Bridge?
that was under urgent need design. So we had originally approved of $900,000 to go towards urgent need design. May Street is almost is in pretty critical condition.
I know
as of
it
right
is, but we haven't put it on as a project
now.
with any construction budget. We've only got it on the design.
It was proposed,
I just didn't do it one of those lists, so.
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, can you go back one more? And then the anticipated projects, Lawrence Road Waterline Project and Wooddale Drive area waterline projects are expected to go before council after we go through those first round of projects.
Lawrence Road.
Lawrence Road is a waterline project.
It's off of Manhattan.
Now, these are the professional contract dollars.
That's design costs.
Are they under or over the original estimated design cost?
So the,
Lawrence Road, Woodell. Is this 158, we're spending 50 more thousand or 50 less thousand?
No, I think they were, the original approved budget was in the first column.
So is this,
that was supposed
Lawrence
to,
Road was $646,000.
so the 646 was actually, it was supposed to include construction. Design and construction.
Okay.
Remember for the water lines.
All
Okay.
water lines were supposed to include
That
design and
was the only
construction.
ones we had designed.
And Woodell, the $1,000,008, so the 197 was probably about the. Did the professionals on these two give us an estimate for construction?
Yeah, the estimate for construction, yeah, for both, it's in this
The last
document
column.
too. So Lawrence Road construction was about 1.9 million. And again, that's gonna include not only the water line, but also the sewer line. If you've ever been to Lawrence Road, it's in extremely bad condition. The road not only needs to be repaved, but that water line is causing a lot of problems for the residents in that area. I would definitely like to see Lawrence Road completed. And the reason that we wanted to go ahead and do the sewer line is because if we're already gonna be repaving that street and doing that water line, we might as well go ahead and do the sewer line as well. Both are causing problems.
I understand that, but did not we make a decision about a year and a half ago in order to change it? Basically, water and sewer had its own revenue source, so we would use this for the things it did, like drainage and streets. Why doesn't that sewer line come out of the water sewer
Sewer's
resource
not
fund?
Sewer's not budgeted with 1% sales tax fund.
Well, that's what you're saying, that
So-
this project includes.
The construction cost is to replace that sewer line as well.
No, well, we're not going to actually replace it, we're actually going to probably CIPP it. I thought though, that part of the discussion was not that we would pay for it using 1% if it was tied to an actual reconstruction project. And this is, even though it's categorized as a water line project, by the time we tear the street up, put new services in on both sides of the street and cross this sewer line, it's gonna be impacted. And so the one method that we thought would probably help is to CIPP that line. So we added that cost in here.
I think
And that,
conceptually that makes total sense. It's just a question of which part of this total construction cost comes from where, is my question. I'm not questioning fixing the sewer line at the same time and all that. It's just, should it all come out of this, or should, I mean, it's all, I realize fungible money, but if water sewer has a revenue source and revenue stream and these others don't,
you're right, we did say that we weren't prioritizing sewer because one, we have to study the collection system and the consent decree, so we don't know where we have to do replacement or
and I don't know how much of this
whatever,
is,
but
I just mean now how much is sewer, if it's $100,000 or is it $1 million?
for that one, we don't need to do the lining while the street's open to replace the water.
I don't necessarily object to it if it's a small part of the budget, I'm just trying to
We'll
figure
go
out
back
what
and
number.
look.
Just, I'd like to know kind of,
Yeah, it's fine.
but if the whole project's gonna be at 9, this 197 for the engineering cost seems reasonable, and the 158 is the whole cost was what,
The whole thing was,
646? Seems a little high, just wonder what I